1, 2, 3, 4.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Thank you, Dan. Yeah, so do we have our Pollinator Smart team here?
I see them coming online.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So first of all, I just want to thank Sharon Baxter from the Department of Environmental Quality, who helped set up this panel and is also helping to fund the program through Department of Environmental Quality's work. On the panel today, we have a number of folks. We've got Rene Hypes, Project Review Coordinator from the Department of Conservation and Recreation in the Division of Natural Heritage. Can you say hello, Rene?
Hi, everyone.
Excellent, welcome. So Rene is currently serving as the Virginia Natural Heritage Environmental Review Coordinator and has been in this position for over 20 years. Her job involves reviewing and assessing impacts to natural heritage resources, such as rare plants and animals and significant communities. She's also a member of the Virginia Pollinator Smart Team. And prior to working with DCR, she was at DEQ as a water protection permit writer. And she also taught high school biology for 11 years. And Rene received her bachelor's in education from Shepherd College and her master's in environmental science from Virginia Commonwealth University. We also have Caitlyn Cyrus, who's an environmental scientist with VHB. Can you say hello, Caitlyn?
Hi, everybody.
Welcome. So Katie is an environmental scientist, as I mentioned, and VHB is a civil engineering firm with offices covering the East Coast. She has a background in field botany, natural resources inventories, and rare, threatened, and endangered plant species surveys. And she's also a member of the Virginia Pollinator Smart Program. Katie has a bachelor's in biology from St. Mary's College of Maryland and a master's in biology from the College of William and Mary. And she's based in Williamsburg, Virginia. And then do we also have Rich Allevi?
Hey, Carrie.
Hi, Rich. Welcome. So Rich is the Vice President of Development with Sun Tribe Solar and is a co-founder as well of Sun Tribe. So in this role, Rich oversees the public affairs, client partnerships, and development engineering teams. He is currently serving as chair of the board of directors for the Charlottesville Renewable Energy Alliance and the vice chair of the Solar Hands-On Instructional Network of Excellence, SHINE, which we heard about earlier today. And lots of achievements in this space. I want to focus on Virginia Tech's highlights here. So was the recipient of the coveted Outstanding Alumni Award from the Department of Biological Systems Engineering, and also a MDVCA or CHESA Solar Champion. And Rich holds a master's in biological systems engineering with a focus on land and water resources and a bachelor's in mechanical engineering, both from Virginia Tech. And then we have Sharon Baxter with us from DEQ. Sharon, do you want to turn on your video and say hello? Excellent.
Yeah, hello, sorry.
All right, well, I will turn it over and we're going to have a slide presentation and some more information about the Virginia Pollinator Smart Program.
Thanks, Carrie. Great introductions.
Yeah.
And, thank you, Katie. Looks like a great presentation.
Yeah. Thanks, Katie. Good morning, everyone. Again, my name's Rene Hypes, and I'm the Environmental Review Coordinator for DCR Natural Heritage. Our mission is to conserve Virginia's biodiversity through inventory protection and stewardship. And I'm also, as Carrie mentioned, part of the Pollinator Smart team. As you can see from the slide, there are many benefits to planting native vegetation, including environmental benefits and agricultural benefits from sustainable, locally adaptive plants, reduction in use of pesticides to increasing pollinator services for adjacent agricultural lands. A recent study published in the Journal of Ecology Letters showed that a higher diversity of flowering plants can increase the breeding success of wild bees and may even help compensate for the negative effects of insecticides. Next slide, please. As many of you know, there's been an overall reduction in some pollinator groups over the last several years. It's hard to say how much of decline has happened among these groups due to the data gaps linked to limited long-term monitoring studies. However, some estimates show that some wild bees have declined 23% across the United States between 2008 and 2013. One of the major causes in the reduction of pollinators is the loss of pollinator habitat. As native vegetation is replaced by roadways and manicured lawns and non-native gardens, pollinators lose the food and nesting sites that are necessary for their survival. Invasive species, the use of pesticides, and climate change are also key factors in the overall pollinator decline of some of these groups. Next slide, please. So what is the big deal if we lose all our pollinators? Pollinators are responsible for 1 out of every 3 bites of food we eat. A single strawberry takes over 20 visits from a pollinator to become a fruit. A single adult female southeastern blueberry bee, a native pollinator of blueberries emerging just before the plants begin to flower, can visit up to 50,000 blueberry flowers, resulting in more than 6,000 ripe blueberries. The majority of our crops are dependent on pollinators, as you see in this slide, and the more pollinator diversity, the greater the yield. Next slide, please. This slide shows some of the science behind the agricultural benefits, the planting of native pollinator habitat. In 2013, the Nature Conservancy and the Natural Resources Conservation Services study calculated the cost of the installation of 1 acre of pollinator habitat per 24 acres of crop production. The analysis was the percent yields per crop directly related to wild pollination, determining production boost in dollars after implementation of the habitat. Though it's hard to see on the slide, if you look to the right here, the squash had an 81% yield from wild pollinators with a production boost of over $1 million. Other fruits and vegetables, including blueberries, watermelons, bell peppers, were at 10% yield from wild pollinators with thousands of dollars in production boost. Next slide. In a 2018 study examining the potential for agricultural benefits from pollinator habitat at solar facilities across the United States, a GIS analysis showed that an estimated 3,500 square kilometers of agricultural land is within foraging distance of utility-scale solar facilities. What an opportunity to increase pollination rates. This article is from 2018, and I'm certain a number of solar facilities have increased significantly over the last 3 years. Just in Virginia last year, DCR reviewed over 100 solar projects. Next slide, please. Native pollinator habitat can also reduce erosion of sediment compared to exotic non-native plants, which are obvious from these photographs. Next slide. One reason for this, as shown in the diagram, is due to the long root systems of the native plant species in feet compared to 4 to 6 inches for turf grass. These long roots help the soil fertility by creating tunnels for water and nutrients, as well as sequestering more carbon than turf grass. Next slide. Not only are there environmental and agricultural benefits, but there are also benefits for the solar developers, ranging from lower maintenance costs to more aesthetically pleasing facilities. Next slide. This graph shows a cost-benefit analysis conducted for a solar project in the Midwest, comparing the maintenance costs of a commercial solar facility associated with the mowing of turf grass and the cost of the installation of native plant habitat with associated maintenance. As you can see, the maintenance cost of the mowed lawn is high throughout the 20-year period of the study, and the maintenance cost of the native planting is much lower, only requiring mowing a couple times a year. The break-even cost for the pollinator habitat installation compared to the turf grass maintenance is dependent on the upfront cost for the native seed mix and occurs anywhere from year 3 to year 7. Doug DeBerry of William & Mary and another Virginia Pollinator Smart team member is currently working to acquire funding to conduct similar research on solar facilities in Virginia for this maintenance cost comparison. Next slide. A slide from Rod Davis of Fresh Energy, yet another Virginia Pollinator Smart team member, shows for every degree Celsius over 25 degrees Celsius, related to 77 degrees Fahrenheit, the average solar photovoltaic panel energy efficiency decreases by an average of 0.6%. So solar panels are sensitive to temperature, and as they warm, their efficiency to produce energy drops. So the planting of vegetation below the panel creates a microclimate that decreases the overall temperature underneath the panels, allowing for more efficient production of energy. There's even a focus on agrovoltaics, growing of crops underneath the panels, which actually are benefited from the shade of the panels in regards to air temperature and atmospheric demand for water. Next slide, please. Another obvious benefit for planting pollinator species within these solar facilities is curb appeal. A field of wildflowers blooming throughout the growing season from early spring through the fall is more aesthetically pleasing to the surrounding community and is a big selling point for local governments. Next slide, please. So this idea of planting native plant species, including pollinator species, can be applied far beyond solar facilities. For instance, brownfields, including reclaimed mine sites and Superfund sites redeveloped into solar, known as bright fields, which is the focus of this conference, could be great candidates for revegetating the sites with native pollinator species. The Mountain Valley Pipeline, working in consultation with DCR and others, have developed seed mixes to include native plant species in their maintained right-of-ways. In addition, transmission line projects due to the open canopy and managed right-of-way provide suitable habitat for the planting of native pollinator species. The Virginia Department of Transportation and the Blue Ridge Prism Group have worked along with DCR to consider the planting of native species within these right-of-ways, the removal of invasive species from their seed mixes, and are currently conducting research to determine which native species are the most suitable for Virginia's roadside right-of-ways. VDOT has also established native pollinator areas at some of the rest stops. The Interagency Wetland Mitigation Banking Team has made recommendations for the use of native pollinator species on many of the proposed wetland mitigation banks. Native pollinator species could be the future crop for some farmers, as a native seed industry is established in Virginia. Parks, schools, and landowners all have opportunities to consider the planting of native plant pollinators as part of their landscaping plans. Research has shown as little as a half an acre of pollinator habitat can benefit pollinators. So as you can see, the establishment of pollinator habitat can be environmentally and economically beneficial. So with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to another Virginia Pollinator Smart team member, Katie Cyrus of VHB, to talk more about the Virginia Pollinator Smart Program and its resources. Katie?
Hi, everybody. So the program really started when DEQ and DCR identified this rapid solar development in Virginia as a huge opportunity to help install and promote pollinator habitat within the state. And using funds from CAT-Z, which is the Coastal Avian Protection Zone, DEQ and DCR were able to release an RFP for consulting services to develop the Pollinator Smart Solar Program. And there are many applicants, but VHB and its team were ultimately selected. So VHB was the lead consultant, but we had so many partners in this, and they were a wealth of knowledge and had a ton of experience in establishing pollinator habitat. So that included Fresh Energy, Pollinator Partnership, Prairie Restoration, Ernst Conservation Seeds, Meadville Land Services, Ernst Pollinator Services, which is now Monarch Vegetation Services, and Dranby Environmental Consulting. Together, our first step was to really start with a massive review of the state of pollinator-friendly habitats at solar facilities. And Virginia is not the only state that has a program like this. So there are actually many. So we started by looking at all of the other states, and we didn't want to reinvent the wheel or anything, and see what they did and what we could take and adapt to really fit Virginia's unique qualities. And there were definitely emerging themes among states. Primarily, it was the program was to the ultimate goal was to receive a certification, a pollinator-friendly certification for the solar site, and that was done through assessment using a scorecard to identify whether the pollinator habitat was providing high-quality areas for pollinators. We also did an exhaustive literature review because we really believe that all that we wanted to do need to be rooted in science and scientific-based evidence. We also held stakeholder meetings through the course of the project. And that was because while we wanted it to be very scientific, we also wanted it to be feasible, and we wanted to make sure that people could participate in it and wanted to participate in it. And so those stakeholder meetings had over 100 attendees, including solar developers, energy providers, consultants, and more. You can see the list. And it really formed the direction that the program went over the course of that year. It was incredibly helpful to get people's feedback. Ultimately, we established several products that are available at www.pollinatorsmartva.com. These were released in December 2020, so they've been out for a little bit more than a year now. And what we came up with were scorecards, a comprehensive manual, a monitoring plan, a business plan, and the Virginia Solar Site Native Plant Finder. All of this is in support for solar sites to ultimately achieve the certified Pollinator Smart designation, of which we have two now. We have Virginia Pollinator Smart, and we have the Gold Certified, which is like essentially the highest tier Virginia Pollinator Smart certification. So the rest of this presentation is essentially a speed round of the products we've developed, and there's so much information that we've come up with that I just can't possibly go through it all and do it justice. So if you have questions, I just highly recommend that you look at the website, which is, again, pollinatorsmartva.com, and just start reading through the materials. This here's a flow chart that I can't go through again because of time, and it's just for your reference for when you look back at these slides later. But essentially what you need to take away from it is that there is a process to be certified, and that the program essentially goes for 10 years. And if all of the, I guess, goals are satisfied, then your site would be certified for the rest of its life after the 10th year. This model is essentially following the Virginia mitigation monitoring model. So if you're familiar with that, then this would be pretty similar as far as frequency of monitoring. So the first program product we developed was the scorecards, and those you can see kind of appear periodically throughout the flowchart. The scorecards are used in order to receive the certification. And there are two of them in our program. We have the proposed/retrofit scorecard and the established site scorecard. Both are form fillable and auto-calculating, and they look very similar. The questions are basically identical. It's just the way that it's worded and the way that you complete the scorecard. So the proposed scorecard is essentially the very first one that you deal with. It is your planning scorecard. So what is going to happen at the site? What are you planning to install? And so you would essentially fill out this scorecard before you buy anything, before you start installing anything, and submit it to the Pollinator Smart team for review. And we would give you a thumbs up, yes, you're certified, or we would come back with some questions until you were certified over time. Then there's the established site scorecard, which is used for evaluating how the installation is actually doing once it's installed. And this scorecard is used every 2 years until that 10th year. So this is actual on the ground monitoring of vegetation, what is happening at the site. So Appendix A of the comprehensive manual explains how to complete each scorecard in extreme detail. So if you have any questions about what we're looking for each one, I would direct you there first. We also have the comprehensive manual. It's just one giant circle around the whole flowchart since it's comprehensive. It really covers all of the important aspects of the program. It's a little over 100 pages, and it's meant to just be reference material for anyone who's interested in participating. There are a lot of things covered in this manual, but that includes site suitability analyses, vegetation management plans, installation steps, how to monitor the site, and how to complete the scorecards. We also have the monitoring plan, which is what you use in order to fill out the established site scorecard for continual certification over time. The monitoring plan is a randomized sampling plot-based approach where you identify vegetation within those plots to the species level and their cover. This model is essentially the same, again, as the Virginia mitigation banking monitoring model. So if you're familiar with that, then this is very similar. You would take the results of your monitoring and apply that to scorecard version B. We also have something called a business plan, which is a little outside of the rest of the materials, but still very important. It is to help launch a native seed industry in Virginia. So don't get me wrong, there are native seeds that you can use to install at your solar site for pollinator habitat now. That's not an issue. However, if every site in Virginia wants to participate, the demand would go up and the supply might not be able to meet it. So there is a need to help grow the native seed industry within the state. Moreover, the state doesn't really have a lot of native local ecotypes, which means that the seed sources genetics are from the state. So you can get species that are native to Virginia to install here, but their genetics may be from adjacent places like Maryland or Delaware, Pennsylvania, something like that. So we're just trying to bring things closer to us through this business plan. I have a quote on the slide that I love that was written by Andy Ernst, who really wrote the business plan for us. And it says that successful native seed production requires an entrepreneurial spirit, creative thinking, versatility, and the willingness to step away from standard agricultural practices. So while this plan won't directly have a lot to do with anyone who's interested in participating in the program, i.e. you don't need it in order to become certified. It is a really interesting read and it's really relevant. So I still suggest that you take the time to look at it if you can. And then finally, we have the Virginia Solar Site Native Plant Finder, which is a really useful and interesting tool. So the Native Plant Finder is essentially a query form. I'm going to jump ahead just so you can see it really quick. Here on the right, there are two forms you can use. You can search a species directly by its common or scientific name, or you can search all of the database for general characteristics. So if looking for plants that achieve a certain niche, you know, full sun or dry or a wet habitat, then you could use this search form. So going back, one thing that's really important for this Native Plant Finder as far as it relates to the program is that it defines what's native for the program. And Virginia, our program is unique because we do focus very heavily on native species, and not all of the state's programs do that. But that's intended to help preserve local pollinators, insects, birds, mammals, and other wildlife, which have co-evolved with plants native to the region and depend upon them for food, shelter, and more. So it really boils down to native species support native pollinators, and that's what we want to do. The Native Plant Finder tool has a database of over 1,600 species that you can search, 278 of which are now commercially available, aka you can buy them from a seed supplier. So jumping ahead, you can really search however you want. If you're doing the monitoring part of your established site and you want to see whether your species can qualify to apply to certain questions on the scorecard, then you can target specific species by searching by name. If you're planning a site and you want to develop a seed mix that is highly specific to the characteristics of your site in particular, because no site is the same, and if you really can't use a pre-made seed mix for this kind of thing, then you would search by the characteristics you're seeking. For example, light requirements, moisture requirements, with pollinator, which is essentially whether it's a beautiful, like big flower, or whether it's a grass or sedge or something. Maximum height, which is a huge constraint at solar sites because you don't want the vegetation to overtop the panels. Locality, so which county you're in. Flowering seasons, so the goal would be to try to get species that flower across the whole growing season instead of clustered in just one. And then plant type, which is again, you know, a grass, a sedge, a flower, whatever, and commercially available. So whether you can actively purchase this now or not. When you search, it'll give you, based on whatever you fill out, it'll return a list of species that could potentially apply to your site, and it will link you to seed suppliers, if you select commercially available, that you could purchase that species from. Finally, we have next steps. So this program, like I said, was released in December 2020. It's still relatively new, and it is by far not set in stone. So we are constantly open to feedback. If you'd like to contact us, either because you have comments or questions or really anything, you can email us at pollinator.smart@dcr.virginia.gov. And you can CC me at csires@vhb.com if you want, but regardless, it will make it to all of us if you go through this pollinator.smart email address. We're hoping this year to develop a training series for interested participants, since there is so much information, and it can be a lot to distill on your own. So that we're hoping to make it more accessible. And we also are really focusing on launching that business plan this year. So the first step is to assemble the Virginia seed growers and to go from there. And then I mean, the possibilities are infinite. This can go in any direction. So that's what and more is. Rene already mentioned the need for pilot project and for research backing up the cost savings of these installations. So that is another and more. And there are 1,000 other directions we hope to go in the future. With that being said, I'd like to turn this over to Rich Allevi from Sun Tribe, who helped develop the first gold certified Pollinator Smart solar facility in the state.
Awesome, thanks, Katie. Can everybody hear me okay? Well, actually nobody's on camera, so I can't get any thumbs up, but I'll just
Sound good.
I'll see. Awesome. All right, well, before I start here, I just wanted to thank the Solar Summit and all the event co-hosts for facilitating the conversation today. I also want to thank Carrie, Renee, Katie, their teams. We're really fortunate here in Virginia to have a public sector that's willing to make pollinator-friendly solar a priority, and lucky as well that they're willing to reach out to great private sector partners to make sure we have the best program possible. So you can switch to the next slide. My name is Rich Allevi. I'm a vice president and co-founder at Sun Tribe Solar. I'm a graduate of the Biological Systems Engineering Department at Virginia Tech, but nowadays I spend my time in Charlottesville, or what we would have called enemy territory when I was in Blacksburg. But in all reality, Sun Tribe has a great relationship with UVA that I can say we're really proud of. We're in the business of developing and deploying solar projects with a variety of client partner classes, with Virginia's public sector really defining the vast majority of our partnerships to date. So we do care a lot about moving to a clean energy future, but more importantly, our mission is to change the way communities think about energy. You can switch to the next slide. So a little bit of a spoiler alert here. I am going to speak about a solar project and the opportunity that it provided to establish a pollinator-friendly habitat through the Pollinator Smart Program. And when I think about that program, it really can change the way communities think about energy and change the way they think about the environment. Next slide. So when we look around at innovation, here's a list of entities that we've worked with to deploy solar. And the reason I'm pointing this out here is to demonstrate that what's staggering about this is that the entire list here is just our public sector partners. Everything from statewide agencies to super local, rural districts, urban, I mean, take your pick. They're really kind of all over the board. And the change is happening now. It's happening in all kinds of places, but the public sector is notably leading the way here. So in a couple of minutes, we're going to talk about the first gold certified site in the Pollinator Smart Program. And what I love about it is that it wasn't a private sector. It wasn't a Fortune 500. It was a public school. So you can switch to the next slide. Why is the public sector going solar? Because there's tremendous impact. We've got some stats here, and I won't go through all of them in detail, but the point is we're seeing massive savings. The number of students that have been impacted by the educational opportunity that solar provides is in the 5 figures. I mean, that's for our projects alone. And communities are achieving their environmental goals and targets. And I'll say one more thing here, which is that we're really proud to have deployed more on-site solar with the public sector than anyone in Virginia, because we really appreciate the positive impact that it has on both the students and the community at large. It's in all honesty, for me, it's super rewarding work, and I know I speak for the team in that regard as well. And that really leads me to one of our favorite projects that we've worked on to date, and that's at Copel Elementary School in Westmoreland County. So you can go to the next slide. One thing that we do know is that this public-private collaboration that Carrie, Renee, and Caitlyn have all talked about today has led to standards that are top-notch for the establishment of native pollinator habitat on ground mount solar sites. So while this is just one example of a long list of partnerships that Sun Tribe has cultivated, we're specifically shining a spotlight on this project today because it was the first gold certified site in the Pollinator Smart Program. So some highlights here. There's over 2,000 solar panels on the site, which are expected to save the school division over $3 million in electricity costs. But the biggest highlight of them all is that students can walk in every day and they can physically see and learn from what's right in front of them. It takes the concept of renewable energy out of the abstract and it makes it real. And now it has the benefit of having a native pollinator habitat as part of that educational opportunity. Now the impact is not just financial, but for the students, it's really a whole new way of thinking about how we interact with the natural world and how we think about pollinator habitat. You can go to the next slide here. It's also helpful for us to understand that this is an opportunity to make an impact at a serious scale. So the last slide where I talked about Copel Elementary, that's one project at around 1 megawatt. But if you look at what Virginia's goals are here, this shows the targets that the Virginia General Assembly set for solar and onshore wind. These targets were modest even just 6 years ago. But because of the Virginia Clean Economy Act, we've seen and will continue to see incredible growth in solar deployment. By 2035, we have to have 16,700 megawatts of renewable energy on the grid. That's a lot of energy, but that also represents a lot of acreage of pollinators if we play this right and if we play it smart. So at the end of the day, what's important about this is that if we use the tools that we've been talking about, we can do a lot more towards ensuring that more communities, just like Westmoreland County, understand what it means to support nutrition and nesting space for pollinators that are critical to the sustainability of our natural world. You can go ahead. The other thing to note here is that when you embrace solar, and especially solar paired with pollinator-friendly species, it gets noticed. And it gets noticed because it matters. We get we get a lot of attention for these projects. We got national attention for the project at Copel Elementary. They have the projects themselves, in my mind, really have the capability of moving the industry. When people read about these efforts, it's all really positive. It's a good thing for solar because it gives communities a good perception of the impact we can make. And I don't know about any of you all, but for anyone who's been involved in trying to push solar projects forward, you may have or probably experienced that public perception can be a complex issue. And this really helps to engage the public in a way that they're now starting to see the benefits of solar and pollinator habitats that are nearby. And now they're not just thinking about solar panels or energy. Now it's a positive development for the community in a big way. So that's all I've got for today. I just want to say that on a personal note, I'm extremely appreciative of all the work that everyone's put in to make the Pollinator Smart Program a reality. We look forward to continuing to drive the industry forward in a way that truly doubles down on our commitment to environmental stewardship and protection of the natural world for future generations. So thanks, everybody. I appreciate your time. Look forward to working on more pollinator projects here in Virginia.
Thank you all so much. I'm just going to jump back in since we have a few extra minutes at the end of the program here to ask a couple of questions and kind of get a little bit of dialogue going. So one of the questions that I saw in the chat is around kind of the timing of the launch of the program, but also the solar boom that's taking place, and how can you kind of go back and bring in pollinators after a site plan has already been developed and approved and permitted? Is it possible to revegetate with pollinators, and what would that look like? So I don't know if anyone wants to jump in on that question. I think, Katie, you mentioned something around repurposing a site or replanting.
Yeah. Let me come back video. Yeah, I mean, it's possible. It is definitely possible to retrofit a site, is what we call it. Yeah, in fact, I believe that Copel was one that might have been retrofitted. So you essentially follow the exact same steps as you would if you were starting this planning pre-construction, with the exception of having to remove, there are a few extra steps to remove existing vegetation on a site. But again, that's all outlined in the comprehensive manual.
And then another question in terms of working with localities. Can you say a little bit more about the level of engagement from localities, and are you seeing any leaders at the local level either putting this into conditional use permits or ordinances, or making it, kind of emphasizing the voluntary nature of it as well?
Yeah, I have so much to say. So I'll try to distill it. I think the first thing I would say is that if you're a locality and that's interested in learning more about this program and how you might be able to incorporate it, please email us at pollinator.smart.dcr.virginia.gov, as it is below. But there are already localities that have incorporated it into their ordinances. City of Chesapeake is a major one for us. And there are also localities that have put it as conditions to obtain a conditional use permit. There are a lot of caveats that I don't want to get into now, but there are a lot of things to think about when setting that kind of, that kind of condition on a developer. And since not every site is the same, it's just really important to think about whether it's feasible or not. But if you're interested, then I would highly encourage reaching out to us so we can talk more about it.
Great. Are there any questions that you're seeing, Dan, from the YouTube side, or question that you want to lob out there to the group?
Thanks. First, I will just say terrific presentation. So much in there. I wish we had given you guys more time. We tried to find as much time for this group as we could. And I wanted, Katie, you gave some great advice in your remarks. You said dive in. There's so much. You guys had great links. These are great programs. We're going to be, of course, sharing all these presentations next week when the big knowledge binder will go out. You'll get everything, but you've got these things on the screen right now, and it's it's a lot. Some of this, it's science, so we have to read, but we have the materials, and these folks are staying on top of it. So as the renaissance or the revolution continues to build steam, they will go in. So I think I don't know if we have time for any more questions, but again, pollinators is a featured topic. You can keep firing your questions in the chats, or you can use the question queue to ask even these speakers questions later, because we're going to send them a copy of all the questions that were asked that maybe we didn't get to either in this session or in today's expert exchange. So don't be shy. A great question on the science may materialize later, and these are the folks that can answer it. So we're going to keep a running log of that. And I will just, what else can I say? Oh, I should really thank, not just our panelists, but their companies too, SunTribe and BHB, Dranby Environmental, Monarch Vegetation Services is a Terawatt sponsor, Earned Seeds, Roundstone Native Seeds, Wetland Studies and Solutions, Environmental Construction Solutions. All these companies are already doing this work. We're not starting from scratch. They have the know-how. And if you look at our schedule, we have more dedicated sessions on pollinators with pollinator stars doing this work, including our keynote on day 3 by Miss Robin Ernst, which I teased earlier, and a very hands-on kind of nuts and bolts presentation on day 3, Greenfields 100 with Mr. Joe Belmonte from Environmental Construction Services. So still a lot to look forward to, even at the end of our program, because this is one of the difference-making issues. As Rich said, it's getting press and it generates beautiful, beautiful pictures, to say nothing about the environmental value. So I'm sorry, I get excited, you guys, as you can tell. Bottom of the hour. Thank you, Carrie. Thank you, Caitlyn. Thank you, Rich, Renee, Sharon. These are the folks doing this work. They're available, and please reach out to them.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.